The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with cold lights and silent walls. Hundreds of alien nobles sat in curved rows, their eyes sharp with greed and expectation. It was the day when the last will of the alien king was to be read, and all waited to see who would inherit his treasures. Whispers floated through the chamber like smoke. Some spoke of hidden vaults filled with star gold. Others dreamed of warships and secret weapons. But above all, the greatest question was, who would gain the honor of carrying the king's legacy? Among the crowd stood one figure who did not belong. A human, tall but plain, dressed in simple clothes that looked weak compared to the glowing robes of the alien lords. He was the outsider, the one no one expected to be here. Some laughed quietly, calling him a mistake in the king's will. Others ignored him as if he were invisible. The Chancellor of the Council lifted the crystal tablet and spoke with a voice that echoed across the hall. By the command of the late king, all inheritances shall now be revealed. Every alien leaned forward, their eyes hungry. The human stood still, unsure why fate had placed him here. First, the Chancellor read the names of generals and ministers. They received planets, fleets, and mountains of wealth. Every time a name was called, cheers filled the air. The chamber grew hotter with excitement. Then, silence fell as the Chancellor reached the last line of the will. His voice slowed as if even he did not believe the words written. The human is granted by royal decree, the king's daughter. A heavy pause fell over the chamber. The words seemed unreal. Then laughter exploded like thunder, shaking the air. Aliens clapped their claws and tails. Some fell from their seats, their eyes wet with cruel joy. A human, given the disgraced one, they shouted. What curse is this? What shameful gift? The human blinked, frozen in shock. He had expected nothing, maybe a mistake in paperwork, but not this. The alien king's daughter? Why her? Why him? His chest tightened as mocking eyes burned into him. Every corner of the chamber buzzed with insults. He is given garbage, one alien sneered. Better to inherit chains than her. Another laughed. The great doors at the side of the chamber opened with a slow grind. Two guards dragged forward a figure in chains, a young alien woman, head bowed low, her arms bound by glowing cuffs. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair tangled, her steps heavy with shame. Gasps filled the air, followed by more laughter. She was the disgraced, the unwanted princess, the one her own people had abandoned. The Chancellor raised his hand for silence. This, he said coldly, is the will of the king. The human's throat tightened. He looked at her thin frame, her trembling shoulders, her eyes that did not dare rise. She was not a prize, not a jewel. She was treated as a punishment. And yet, something stirred in him. He did not see filth or failure. He saw someone broken, someone alone. The council laughed harder. Take her, human. Take your shame with you. See how low the king's blood has fallen. Some spat on the floor, others covered their mouths to hide cruel smiles. The human clenched his fists but said nothing. He could not fight them. Not here. Not yet. But deep inside, a strange fire lit within him. They had mocked him. They had mocked her. And he felt, maybe for the first time, that he had been given something worth more than gold. As the guards pushed the disgraced daughter forward, her chains rattled like dead bells. For a brief moment, her eyes lifted and met the human's. They were cold, guarded, but behind that wall of shame burned a tiny spark. She seemed to ask without words, "Why are you looking at me like that?" The Chancellor slammed the crystal tablet shut. The will is complete. The session is ended. The human stepped forward as the guards shoved her into his care. The council's laughter followed him like knives, cutting deep into his back. But he did not look away from her. In that moment, in the middle of mockery and shame, he knew his life had just changed forever. The long corridors of the council palace echoed with every step the human took. Beside him, the disgraced daughter walked slowly, her chains clinking with a rhythm of sorrow. Guards on either side smirked and whispered, their cruel laughter, bouncing off the tall glass walls. For them this was entertainment, a human inheriting the shame of a great king. For him, it was confusion, fear, and something else he could not yet name. When they reached his assigned chambers, the guards unlocked the cuffs and pushed her forward. She stumbled but did not cry out. Instead, she straightened herself with quiet pride, even though her body trembled. The guards laughed one last time before leaving. "Enjoy your gift, human," one mocked, "but be careful. Curses rub off." The doors closed with a heavy thud, leaving the two of them alone in silence. The human stood still, his heart racing. He had been in dangerous places before, but never in a moment like this. He looked at her, trying to understand what kind of woman the king's daughter truly was. Her head remained low, her hair falling over her face. She looked more like a prisoner than royalty, more like a ghost than a princess. At last he spoke, his voice low. "Do you want food?" Her shoulders twitched, but she did not answer. He tried again. "You don't have to bow or kneel here." For the first time, her eyes lifted, sharp and filled with disbelief. She studied him as if waiting for the trick, waiting for the cruelty that always came after false kindness. "You are different," she whispered finally, her voice broken but steady. "You do not laugh at me, why?" The human was taken aback. He had no real answer except that the sight of her chains had cut into him like a blade. "I am human," he said simply. "I don't see you the way they do." Her lips pressed tightly, as if fighting the urge to speak more. But then she looked away, her gaze drifting to the corner of the room where shadows gathered. "I was not given to you as a gift," she said quietly. "I was given as a burden, to make them laugh at you, to drag your honor into the dust." Her words carried no tears, only a deep bitterness carved by years of rejection. The human frowned. "Honor? I don't care about their laughter." He stepped closer, his voice firmer now. "But I do care about you." Those words made her freeze, her body tense, her breath caught. No one had spoken like that to her, not her people, not her council, not even her father before his death. For the first time, she looked at him not with suspicion but with a flicker of wonder. That night, she sat at the edge of the bed, refusing to eat the food he offered. Her pride would not let her accept kindness too quickly. He did not force her. He left the tray nearby and rested on the floor with nothing but a blanket. The air between them was heavy, filled with silence and unspoken questions. As the lights dimmed and the chamber grew cold, she spoke again, her voice softer, almost lost in the night. "Do you know why they call me Disgraced?" He turned toward her, his eyes catching hers in the faint glow. "No," he answered honestly, "but I would like to know." She closed her eyes, and for a moment it seemed she would remain silent forever. Then, in a whisper that carried both pain and defiance, she said, "Because I refuse to obey." The human leaned forward, his curiosity burning stronger. She opened her eyes again, and in them he saw a fire hidden beneath the ashes of shame. "I was meant to be a weapon for them, to marry who they chose, to keep their power unbroken," she explained. "But I said no, and for that they chained me, cursed me, called me unworthy of my father's blood." The words struck the human deeply. This was not a weak woman, not a disgrace. This was someone who had dared to stand against an empire. He realized then that her chains were not a symbol of failure, but of courage. And perhaps that was why the king had chosen him, a human to inherit her. Maybe the king had known his daughter needed someone who would not see her as a curse, but as a truth yet unseen. The night ended with silence once again, but this time it was different. She sat straighter, her eyes no longer on the floor but on the window where stars shone beyond the glass, and he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why his heart felt heavier and yet strangely alive. The council thought this was a joke, a humiliation, a curse, but deep inside, the human began to sense that this inheritance was not the end of him. It was only the beginning. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the palace walls. The human sat cross-legged on the floor with only a thin blanket, while the alien princess rested stiffly on the edge of the bed. Neither spoke, but the silence between them felt louder than any laughter they had endured earlier. Outside, the city of lights glowed in the night, but inside the room only shadows grew. The daughter did not close her eyes. Her back remained straight, her hands clenched together tightly. She had been taught all her life that kindness was a mask, and behind it waited cruelty. So even though the human had spoken softly, even though he had not mocked her, she expected the blow to come. Every heartbeat told her to prepare for pain. The human, on the other hand, struggled with thoughts he could not push away. He remembered the council's laughter, their sneers, their eyes filled with mockery. They wanted him to feel cursed. They wanted him to bow under shame. But when he looked at the woman sitting quietly in front of him, he could not see disgrace. He saw someone who had endured more pain than he could imagine, and yet still carried herself with pride. He finally broke the silence. "You should try to rest," he said gently. She turned her head slowly, her eyes narrow, her voice sharp. "Do you command me now?" The human shook his head quickly. "No, I would never. I only suggest." The tension in her shoulders softened slightly, though her face remained guarded. Minutes passed before she asked quietly, "Why do you not chain me? Why do you not strike me as others would?" Her question carried years of bitterness, as if she had asked it many times in her life and never received an answer. The human looked at her with calm eyes. "Because I am not them." She studied his face, searching for lies, but found only a tired sincerity that made her chest ache in a way she had long forgotten. The food tray still sat untouched near her. The human picked it up and set it closer. "Eat, at least a little." Her pride fought against her hunger, but the sweet smell of the alien bread gnawed at her strength. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to him as if expecting laughter the moment. She reached for it, but when he looked away respectfully, she finally picked a piece and nibbled in silence. For the first time in years, she ate without chains pulling at her arms. For the first time, no one forced her to kneel or bow as she swallowed each bite. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away. The human did not comment. He pretended not to see, which made her gratitude even heavier. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "You are strange, human. Do you not fear that keeping me will ruin you? They will never respect you. They will laugh until the end of your days." He leaned back against the wall, his eyes half closed. "Respect does not matter to me, but your life does." The words cut into her like a blade, sharp and deep. No one had ever spoken them before, not even her father. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken emotions. She turned her face toward the stars outside the window, whispering to herself, "Perhaps I was not meant to die in shame after all." The human heard her but said nothing. Instead, he wrapped his thin blanket tighter and kept watch, his mind restless, his heart heavier than before. Suddenly a sound echoed from outside the door, a faint scratch, then another, followed by a soft click. The daughter stiffened, her eyes wide, her instincts sharp from years of betrayal. The human rose quietly to his feet, motioning for her to stay still. He moved closer to the door, his muscles tense, his ears straining. The lock clicked again. Louder this time, someone was trying to break in. The daughter's breath quickened, fear flashing in her eyes. But in the next heartbeat, she surprised herself. She cried out, not in terror, but in warning, "Human! Behind you!" The door burst open, shadows pouring into the chamber, blades glinting in the dim light. The human lunged forward, slamming the nearest intruder against the wall. The daughter pulled at her chains, ready to defend those she had nothing but her voice. The clash was sudden, violent, and filled the chamber with chaos. When the last attacker fled, leaving the door broken, silence returned once more. The human stood breathing hard, a cut across his arm, but alive. The daughter stared at him with wide eyes. She had not meant to shout, not meant to care. Yet when danger came, her voice had chosen to save him. The human met her gaze, and in that moment something shifted between them. The laughter of the council, the mockery of the galaxy, all felt distant now. What mattered was the bond beginning to form in the quiet fire of survival. And though neither spoke the words aloud, both felt it. Their story together had only just begun. The chamber still smelled of fear and blood. Shattered fragments of the door lay scattered across the floor. The human tied a cloth around his wounded arm. His breath, steady though pain, burned in every movement. The daughter watched him silently, her hands trembling but her gaze sharp. For the first time she had seen him fight not with cruelty but with determination. And for the first time, her warning had saved someone instead of being ignored. As the guards finally rushed in too late, they looked at the broken door and the unconscious intruders. Instead of offering help, they smirked. Seems the human's curse draws trouble quickly, one whispered to the other. The human glared at them, but they only laughed and left, refusing to take the attackers away. It was clear now the council had sent those men and no guard would protect him or her. The daughter spoke in a low voice. They will not stop. Her words carried a weight that chilled the air. They want me dead, and now you as well. Their laughter will not end until you are broken. The human tightened the cloth on his, wound his jaw firm. Then let them try. They will find I am not so easy to break. She stared at him with disbelief. Most would have surrendered her back to the council, begging for mercy. Yet this human did the opposite. He stood taller, his defiance burning brighter the more they mocked him. For the first time, a spark of respect lit in her chest, though she quickly tried to hide it. The next day, whispers filled the city. Aliens of every kind gossiped about the human who dared to keep the disgraced daughter. Some laughed openly as he walked the streets. Look, the human walks with shame. Beside him, others spat near his feet, calling him a fool and a weakling. But the human kept his head high, ignoring the jeers, his hand always near the hilt of his blade. The daughter walked beside him, her hood pulled low. Every insult thrown at him cut her deeper than the chains ever had. She wanted to scream at them, to fight back, but her pride and pain kept her silent. Only when they returned to the quiet of his chambers did she finally speak. Why do you not leave me? Why carry this weight when the whole galaxy laughs at you? His answer was calm, steady, unshaken. Because you are not weight. You are worth. Her chest tightened, her eyes wide, her voice broke. Worth? I have no worth. I am cursed, disgraced, abandoned. The human stepped closer, his voice firm. Then let me decide your worth, not them. Her heart trembled at his words. For years she had been told she was less than nothing, a stain on her bloodline, yet this outsider, this human, spoke as if she was more than all of them. Something she had buried long ago began to stir inside her, a fragile hope. That night she did not sit at the edge of the bed as before. She moved closer to where he rested on the floor. Her voice was softer, not sharp, not bitter. You fight for someone you barely know. Are all humans like this? He smiled faintly, shaking his head. No. Many humans would have walked away, but I cannot. Not when I see truth buried under lies. Before she could answer, a heavy knock shook the door. This time, it was not assassins, but council messengers. They carried scrolls of command, their faces proud and cruel. The council demands the return of the daughter, one announced. You have no right to keep her, human. The human unrolled the scroll, reading the words carefully. But when he looked back up, his voice was steady, his defiance unbroken. Tell the council, he said coldly, that I refuse. The messengers laughed, their eyes filled with mockery. No one refuses the council, human. You will kneel, and you will surrender her. But the human stood tall, his hand on the door, his voice sharp as steel. I will not kneel, not to you, not to them, and never again to laughter. The messengers left with threats on their tongues, promising punishment. The daughter stood frozen, her body tense, her breath quick. She had expected him to yield, to break, to hand her over to save himself. But instead, he had stood against the council itself. Her chest ached with emotions she could not name. Fear, pride, gratitude, and something softer. As night fell, she whispered to him for the first time without bitterness, You are strange, human, and dangerous. You do not fear them even when they hold the galaxy in their hands. He looked at her with quiet strength. They may hold the galaxy, but they do not hold me. In the shadows of that night, The bond between them deepened. The laughter of the council no longer felt like the end. It felt like the beginning of a war neither of them had chosen. And though fear lingered in both their hearts, one truth had become clear. Together, they would no longer bend to mockery. The room was quiet after the messengers left. The daughter sat near the window, her eyes fixed on the endless stars, her heart heavy with memories she had tried to bury. The human cleaned his wound in silence, his jaw tight with anger, his mind, still burning with the arrogance of the council. Neither spoke for a long time, but the air between them carried an unspoken weight. At last the daughter broke the silence, her voice low and trembling. "You do not understand, human. You think their laughter is harmless, but it is sharper than any blade." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "Do you know why I am disgraced? Do you know what shame they chained to my name?" The human lifted his head, his gaze steady. "No, tell me." Her hands clenched, her voice cracked with both anger and pain. "They call me cursed because I defied them, because I refused to be their tool." She rose from her seat, her chains rattling softly, her face lit by the pale glow of the stars. "They ordered me to marry a warlord who killed innocents, a monster who burned villages for sport." Her voice shook, but her pride held strong. "I said no, I would not join him, I would not bear children for a butcher." The human's chest tightened as he listened. Her story was not one of disgrace, but of defiance. She had risked everything, her throne, her safety, her name, just to resist cruelty. Yet for her courage she had been cast out, mocked, chained, branded a curse. Tears formed in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. "My father. He was weak at the end, he could not protect me. So the council took everything from me. They erased me from the royal line. They spread lies that I was tainted." She laughed bitterly, a sound sharp with pain. "And now they throw me to you, a human, as if I am garbage, as if I am worth less than dust." The human rose slowly and stepped closer. His voice was calm but heavy with conviction. "You are not garbage. You are not cursed. You are stronger than any of them." She looked at him with wide eyes, disbelief trembling in her chest. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. "No one." He reached out not to touch her but to stand near enough that his presence was undeniable. "You were punished for doing what was right, and they call that shame, I call it honor." Her lips parted, her breath shaky, her walls cracking under the weight of his words. For years she had carried her secret as poison, but in that moment, it felt like a wound finally beginning to heal. The silence stretched heavy with emotion. Her eyes softened as she studied him. His tired face, his steady stance, his refusal to bend. Slowly, she whispered, "Why do you care? Why do you fight for me when you owe me nothing?" The human answered without hesitation, "Because you deserve someone to fight for you, and I will not let their lies define who you are." Her throat tightened. Tears she could no longer hide, slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years she let herself cry, not in shame but in release. The human did not move closer. He simply stayed near, giving her the space to break without fear. That silence, that small kindness, was louder than any promise he could have spoken. Later, when her tears had dried, she turned toward him with a new resolve in her eyes. "They will never forgive me, and now they will never forgive you," she said firmly. Her chains clinked as she stood tall, her voice steady again. "You must understand, human, by choosing to keep me, you have made yourself their enemy." And the human only nodded, his jaw firm. "Then let me be their enemy." The daughter stared at him, her chest filled with a strange mix of fear and admiration. This human did not bend, did not break, and she felt for the first time that perhaps her curse could become something else. Perhaps her disgrace was not the end, but the beginning of a story no one had expected. As night fell, the city outside burned with whispers. The council spread rumors faster than fire, twisting her past into uglier lies. But within the chamber, for the first time she felt warmth. She was still chained, still watched, still hunted. But she was not alone anymore, and in the quiet of that night, she made a silent vow to herself. If the council came for him, if the galaxy rose against him, she would no longer stay silent. She would no longer bow. For the human who had called her strong, She would fight. The next morning, the summons came. The council demanded his presence, their words sharp and cold. "Bring the disgraced daughter before us, surrender her to judgment or face exile," the scroll declared. The human read it slowly, his fists tightening with every word. The daughter stood nearby, her heart heavy, knowing what awaited him if he refused. "You do not have to go," she said, her voice trembling. "They want to break you, to humiliate you in front of the galaxy." But the human shook his head firmly. "No, if I run, their laughter wins. I will face them, and I will not bow." She watched him, her chest aching, torn between fear and pride. She had seen warriors before, kings before, lords before, but never had she seen someone stand so tall with so little power. The council chamber was filled once more. Nobles lined the seats, their eyes hungry for spectacle. The chancellor raised his voice. "Human, you were given the king's disgrace as inheritance, yet you hold her close, you dare to protect her. Do you think yourself above our law?" Laughter erupted across the chamber, cruel and sharp, echoing like thunder. The human stepped forward, his voice steady, his gaze firm. "I think your law is not justice. I think your laughter is not truth." Gasps spread through the chamber. Silence cut through the noise for a moment. No one expected a human, an outsider, to speak with such boldness, yet his words carried weight. Not from power, but from courage. The chancellor sneered. "You shame yourself by defending filth." The daughter flinched at the word, her heart pounding. But before she could speak, the human raised his hand. "Enough," he said sharply, his voice ringing like iron. "She is not filth, she is not cursed, she is stronger than any of you." Whispers rushed through the chamber like a storm. The council shifted in their seats, some outraged, some uneasy. Never before had anyone defended her openly. Never before had someone risked themselves to speak her worth. The daughter's breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. For the first time in years, someone had stood against the storm for her. The chancellor's face twisted with fury. "You dare insult the council? You dare raise your voice here? You are nothing but a human, a mistake of inheritance." But the human did not back down. He took another step forward, his shadow stretching across the marble floor. "I am human. Yes, but I am not a mistake. I am proof that your lies cannot silence truth." The chamber grew restless. Some nobles shouted for his exile. Others demanded his death. But in the middle of their chaos, the daughter felt something ignite inside her. His words had broken the chains she thought unbreakable. Her eyes filled with tears, not of shame, but of pride. The human turned slightly, his gaze meeting hers, and in that silent look he promised her, "You are not alone." Her heart swelled, her fear melted into determination. If he could stand tall in front of the galaxy, then so could she. The chancellor pounded his staff against the floor, calling for order. "Enough of this farce. The human has insulted us all. He shall be punished." But before the guards could move, the daughter rose to her feet, her chains rattling, her voice breaking through the noise. "No," she cried, her words fierce and clear. "He has spoken truth, and I will no longer be silent." The chamber fell into stunned silence. The disgraced daughter, the cursed princess, the one who never spoke, had found her voice again. Her eyes blazed as she stood beside the human, her pride returning. "You mocked me. You chained me. You called me cursed because I defied cruelty. But I am not ashamed anymore." She lifted, her chin high, her voice trembling with power. "And I will not let you take him from me." The nobles gasped. The chancellor's eyes burned with rage, but the human only smiled faintly, pride in his gaze. He placed his hand gently on the chain, between her wrists, as if to say, "We will break this together." And for the first time in the council's chamber, the laughter faltered, replaced by unease. What had begun as mockery was turning into fear. The human stood tall, unbroken. The daughter stood with him, her shame burned away by truth. The galaxy watched in silence, knowing that something had shifted forever. The council chamber was no longer filled with laughter. Where once the nobles roared with mockery, now they sat in uneasy silence. The human stood tall in the center, the disgraced daughter at his side, their shadows stretching together beneath the golden light. Her chain still clinked with every movement, but her posture was no longer bent, her head no longer bowed. She looked proud, and that sight unsettled those who had once enjoyed her humiliation. The Chancellor's face darkened, his voice sharp with fury. You dare speak against us. You dare stand beside her, as if she is worthy. The human met his glare without fear, his voice calm but steady. She is worthy more than any of you who sit here and call cruelty justice. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their claws tapping, their tails twitching. For centuries, no one had spoken to them with such defiance, especially not a human outsider. But the humans' words carried something that their laws could not silence. Truth. The Chancellor tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow. She is cursed. She was abandoned by her own blood. Who are you to decide her value? The human stepped closer, his voice rising. I am the one who inherited her, and I say she is not cursed, she is not disgrace, she is strength, she is fire, and I will not let you bury her any longer. The daughter's heart thundered in her chest, her eyes wide. No one had ever spoken for her like this, no one had ever lifted her name from the ashes. Her throat tightened, tears filled her eyes, but she stood straighter, her pride restored. And for the first time, she believed the chains on her wrists did not define her anymore. The council erupted in chaos, voices clashing, some demanding the human's exile, others calling for silence. But beneath their shouting, whispers grew among the lower seats. Some younger nobles looked at the human not with mockery but with curiosity, even respect. And some eyes turned to the daughter with unease, as if realizing she was no longer the broken figure they remembered. The Chancellor slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. Enough, you will both be punished. No one defies the council and lives. The guards moved forward, their weapons drawn, their faces grim. The daughter tensed, but before fear could overwhelm her, the human stepped in front of her, his body shielding hers. He raised his voice, sharp as steel. Strike me if you dare, but know this. Every laugh you gave me only made me stronger, and every chain you placed on her only revealed her courage. The chamber fell silent once more. The guards hesitated, their steps faltering. For his words carried a weight their orders could not erase. The daughter stepped forward too, her voice fierce. I am no longer your disgrace. I am no longer your curse. I am the blood of a king, and beside this human, I will not bow to you. Her words rang out like fire, her chains rattling like broken thunder. The nobles stared in shock, their mouths open, their arrogance shaken. For years she had been silent, broken, mocked. But now she stood with a human at her side, and together they looked unshakable. The laughter that once filled the chamber was gone, replaced by whispers of fear, whispers of change. The council, for the first time, looked uncertain. The Chancellor's voice cracked with rage. You are nothing, both of you. The galaxy will never follow you. The human answered calmly, his eyes burning. Perhaps not today, but they will see. They will see your lies, and they will see her truth. And when that day comes, it will not be your laughter they hear. It will be your silence. The daughter's eyes glistened, her heart swelling with pride. She had been abandoned, disgraced, cast aside, but in this moment, standing beside him, she felt reborn. She turned her head toward the human, whispering so only he could hear. You gave me back my honor, and I will never leave your side. The council chamber trembled with tension. The human and the daughter stood together, their defiance blazing like a beacon. And though the chain still bound her wrists, everyone in the room saw it clearly. She was no longer their prisoner. She was his choice, his ally, his equal. Outside the chamber, whispers spread like wildfire. The story of the human who stood against the council, the story of the disgraced daughter who found her voice again. The galaxy began to listen, and those who once mocked now watched with unease. For laughter had turned to fear, and fear would soon turn to respect. And as the doors of the council closed behind them, the human knew one truth. What began as a cruel inheritance had become something greater, not a curse, not a burden, but the beginning of a legend that no laughter could erase.